Hey there, everyone. This is Mystic Fish, and welcome to a bonus episode for our Factorio series on building an expandable base. Last episode, we actually got ourselves all the way up to the target science per minute of 1350 science per minute. That is a full half blue belt of each of the sciences, which the base is successfully processing now. So that is exciting. This definitely took us a while to get to, but I figured I would do one extra episode here and just kind of recap how we got here so that if you don't feel like waiting through the whole series, you've forgotten how we got where we were getting, we can go ahead and talk about the various features of the base here. So just at a high level, all of the blueprints that we use are here in this blueprint book. I've provided a link to that in the video description. And I am going to, as we talk about different designs, I'm going to actually put links in the video that will take you back to the design video. We actually did a lot of upfront design here to design a lot of these blueprints. And so when I make mention of them, I'm going to try to put a link back to the design episode. So if you want some more detail about how those particular blueprints work or how we went through the process of designing them, you can go back and see those specific episodes. So stay tuned for that. So what was the point of this base? The point of this base was, first off, to build a mega base. So, the Factorio subreddit defines a megabase as running at over 1,000 signs per minute for at least an hour. And so just again, to review, this base does in fact do that. Like we're getting our 1350. It's been solid for the last hour. So this is in fact a megabase, but I wanted to design a megabase in such a way that we could actually scale it up from sort of the very beginning as much as possible without redesigning the whole base. So a large portion of the design of this thing is meant so that we can start at sort of a lower science throughput, lower science per minute, and then gradually kind of upgrade it in place without really affecting the overall base design. And so we definitely were able to do that. I do want to note that at least for this design, like we would have to do additional work to scale it up even higher if we wanted to. And so maybe I'll talk a little bit at the end about where I think some of the bottlenecks are. But we had a specific goal in mind, which is, hey, I want to target this many signs per minute, and I want to get there from the very beginning. So let's go back to the beginning. At the very beginning, when we're doing our burner stuff, one of the first designs that we built was this little Bootstrap contraption. So it was designed to run off a single steam engine. And I think we picked up the lab at some point, but it's designed to just sort of make a couple of intermediates. I think we also picked up the green science build that was green circuit build here. So this is really meant to build green circuits, gears, belts, and red science and ammo. And so we just basically hand fed a few things in here, and that helped us get going. This is sort of our initial automation here to get things going. Let's see. We can actually, in fact, see a little bit of the residue of the initial burner phase. So there's actually we have some iron mines in there, iron miners in there, and some copper miners here. We just did a little bit of that. We largely left those in. I think I replaced the ones for stone and coal at some point. But there's actually, we still actually have some of the original ore patches here. I think we mostly ran out of iron and stone, but the rest of it is here. Our initial power plant was used steam power, and this was sort of one of the things that we expanded over time. So we started out designing for coal power, so being able to have maybe about this much of the basically a full yellow belt of coal to power this much steam. We also designed it to be expandable so that if we substituted solid fuel, as we see here, there's some solid fuel still coming through here, then we could actually extend it and support a larger number of boilers and steam engines. And this turned out to be a good thing because we actually ended up using the full solid fuel steam plant over the course of the episode. It wasn't exactly clear whether we were going to need to do that before we got to nuclear power, but it turned out we did. So I will say one of the things we had here was part of our design was getting a sort of initial sense of a base layout. The actual base doesn't exactly follow this. We definitely, as things developed, we tweaked it, but this was kind of our sketch that we based a lot of our designs around. And even though like some of these different modules went to different places, it generally this is pretty close. So what else are we going to talk about? Initial defenses were, we had a nice little turret system here, turrets surrounded by walls. We have a few of those left around the base. I think there's some around this smelting over here. And one of the first things that we did was we started to work on the Jumpstart base. So as you can see, the base is based around these 100 by 100 tile grids, and so generally speaking, the grids have space for a path around them. Lots of people enjoyed watching me, fail to drive on the paths properly, but they're surrounded with large electric power poles. They have some radar in them, and they have Roboport coverage across it. So generally, the whole thing is sort of one big logistics network. There are some gaps in here where it wasn't convenient to put Roboports, but that was the general idea. Like this whole thing is kind of connected together. And so the Jumpstart base fit in a single grid tile, and this was just enough for us to do some basic smelting. So we've got a couple of stacks of iron, a stack of copper, a little bit of stone bricks, a little bit of steel, and this was designed to basically produce, if I want to say 30 science per minute, something like that, of red and green and black and blue science, which is enough for us to get construction bots. And so we can see that there's a build here that let us actually build construction bots to be placed into the Roboport and then bootstrap things. There's a reduced mall that this is just the set of stuff that was necessary really to have construction bots build the sort of proper mall for the base. So that makes it smaller. It fits in the single square. This is not designed for throughput. This is really just designed to do the research needed to get us construction bots, because we relied pretty heavily on construction bots to build the rest of the base. But as you can see, right, we only have 4 assemblers each of red and green science, and so not too bad. I think we came back a few times and sort of pilfered things that were still in here, but we emptied a bunch of stuff out at some point, over the course of the game. Okay, so then the next thing that we worked on was the train system. And so generally speaking, we bring all of the resources, mostly from the base, are brought in by train. That's definitely necessary once we got to the final scale of the base, but we basically moved to this pretty quickly. We have a standard blueprint here for receiving the trains in. They unload here with there's some circuit logic that lets us make sure that we do balanced unloading, so that whatever is in these chests, we keep about the same amount in all of the chests. That means when a train comes in, it can actually unload, and all of its cars should empty at about the same time, which means that it comes in, it unloads, and then it can leave. So that is that keeps the train in here for the minimum amount of time, and then it goes back out. We then have a balancer to come out here. This is actually a lane balancer. This was originally yellow belts, and so I modified a design. Let's see, we have a version of it. So for example, this is a third-party Rainquest. That's where I found it. Rainquest has a book of balancer designs. This is the 8x8 lane balancer. It relies on having blue belts. So in particular, like this blue underground, hops 8 tiles across, right? So that doesn't work for yellow belts. So I modified that design and just sort of spaced it out a little bit more so that we could build it with yellow belts. So this does actually work properly with yellow belts now. So that's trained. So we got basically, we got coal and iron and copper and stone in, as well as oil. Although initially we built the oil base and we just used, it turned out there were some oil fields that were within scope, and so we just sort of like pretended that we had oil trains coming in, and instead we just pumped this stuff directly in to the tank. So we have unloading for oil as well. Then the main point here was to power our mall. So again, the mall fits in a single grid segment, and this produces absolutely everything that we end up using in the rest of the base. So and it really relies on having these sort of standard belts snaking through the rest of the base. There are also some additional things, especially once we've got logistic spots, and that makes it more convenient to build some of the higher tier equipment that we don't need a lot of, like Power Armor Mark II or Spidertrons and things like that. So we also had facilities for building some of that extra stuff over here as well. I guess one feature of the mall is that there's sort of some specialized builds specifically for belts and underground belts, as well as intermediates. And so these are beefed up and beaconized so that we can supply the rest of the mall adequately. Over the course of the playthrough, we ended up upgrading various pieces of this just to make certain things run faster. But you can see we didn't end up even needing speed modules for most of this stuff. So that worked okay. So that was our mall. And then after that, it's a process of building out all of the sciences. And the rough idea with the sciences is, let's take blue science as an example, is we built these kind of single column builds, right? So this column right here starts from raw materials, right? So raw coal or smelted copper and iron, smelted steel, maybe petroleum gas and water. And starting just from these raw materials, it is able to produce all of the intermediates and everything that go into producing the blue science, which comes out the top. And these were designed this way specifically so that we could put beacons on either side. So the initial versions of these used assembly machine 2s, just single tier 1 productivity or tier 1 speed modules in them, no beacons, and yellow belts. And the idea was that we started by figuring out, okay, if we can fit this all into one build, how many of them do we need? So in this case with blue science, we figured out that we needed five of the builds once we were fully upgraded to hit our science per minute target. And so we laid down 5, working sort of at the initial tier of yellow belts, no beacons, and tier 1 modules. And so then we proceeded through several phases of upgrades for each science. And so for each science, we start out, as I said, with assembly machine 2s and tier 1, basically a max of 2 tier 1 modules, 1 productivity, 1 speed. We actually didn't build modules for a long time. So for a long time, we were running without any modules at all and no beacons. The next phase, we upgraded to red belts. In order to keep up with that, we upgraded to assembly machine 3s, and we were able to double the modules. So we went from one speed 1 module and one productivity module to 2 of each of those. So we got 2 speed, 2 productivity in an assembly machine 3, and that let us keep up with the red belts. The next phase was we upgraded to blue belts. And in order to do that, we added the beacons with speed 1 modules in them. The next phase after that was converting all the modules that were in machines to be productivity modules, and then upgrading to productivity module 2s and speed module 2s. And then the final version was tier 3 productivity modules and tier 3 speed modules. So all of the builds went through all of those phases. And the basic idea is with each build, we needed to make sure that we were bringing in the right raw materials. So for example, is this even the, no, here it is. So for example, for blue science, here's the smelted iron coming in from here. And so it comes through these smelting stacks. Now, the smelting stacks are just inside the trains. So the idea is that like when I'm dropping off something smeltable, it's being smelted generally right next door. And so we come out of the balancer, the unloading balancer here, and into the smelting stacks. We also went through a few phases here for these. So initially, things looked kind of like this, but we had yellow belts and stone furnaces. And so the nice thing is that when we wanted to upgrade to red belts, we could upgrade to red belts and steel furnaces. And so here's an example of something that got to that point. When we got to blue belts, we then scrapped all of this and moved to electric furnaces with beacons. And that's primarily in order to get a smelting array that fit in the same footprint. So this was a case where we did have to tear this stuff out and then put these in, which was sort of the most destructive upgrade that we had to do. But it did fit in the same space and allowed us to go from red to blue belts. And we were able to add a little productivity as well. That meant that we didn't have to fully unload at line rate over here, even though our unloading designs I think would have supported it. But then we needed basically the speed modules here and in here in order to make sure that this number of electric furnaces could keep up with the required output. But those swapped in there for smelting. What else is there to go over? Those are, I think, all of the upgrades. What else should we cover? Oh, so I think that's most of the resource stuff that we need to talk about in the base. This even applied, to space science as well. So we had, in this case, 18 of the builds for space science. We turned them sideways so that they would sort of fit in our regular base design, but that worked out okay. And then we needed a couple of rocket silos in order to produce the space science, so those are working over here. So let's next talk about defense, because this was something that we upgraded over time. So our initial form of defense was primarily mines, and this was one of the things that was produced by the Jumpstart base here. It has facilities for building mines and cliff explosives. This allowed construction bots to be sort of the main part of the defense of the base. So we relied on mines pretty heavily for a long time, and it wasn't until we really got reliable inputs for all of our resources supplied to the mall that we started to work on more interesting walls. So the next, our walls in the next phase, we added walls and added flamethrower turrets around this. Nice thing about flamethrower turrets, they do area of effect damage, and so they're a very cheap and effective way to kill things outside the walls, especially because we have this kind of dragon tooth design that funnels the biters into these nearby areas, which means that we can concentrate the flamethrower fire in one area. It makes it very effective. Eventually, in later versions, we then also added laser turrets as well. And so the laser turrets, especially once we got into infinite science, these became the basis for really doing a lot of the kills. We can maybe see some of this in action. Let's see if we can catch an attack coming here. We have nearly constant attacks. All right, let's see if we can see something here. Yeah, okay, the biters are all dead already. So this is definitely super effective at holding off attacks. As far as the defense, well, you can see we initially started building walls around the main base. For a while, we left the two north and south ends open while we were still expanding things. So in particular, we were expanding power up this direction. So we have a tileable nuclear power build. So this is actually quite a bit of nuclear reactors. And that is producing, 8.5 gigawatts. So that's pretty good. And we were able to scale that up as far as we needed to cover the needs of the base. But while we were expanding, we would basically just put a string of mines in sort of the open ends of the base. That was sort of enough to keep any, interested biters out of here while we were expanding the base. So that seemed to work out pretty well. All right, let's talk. We need to talk outposts, but before we get there, since I mentioned the nuclear power plant, we can talk about what we did over here. So we built a uranium mining outpost that has a place to drop off sulfuric acid. So the idea is we construct sulfuric acid at the main base, bring it out here, use it to power the uranium minings, pick up the uranium ore, and bring it back. That arrives over here, where you can see we are slowly unloading. It turns out once we get going with Covarex, like we barely need any uranium even to produce the massive amount of power that we just saw. The sulfuric acid is actually just done right here to fill this up, and so we've got plenty of sulfuric acid waiting here. We even have another train with more ore ready to go here, and in fact, it like barely unloaded any sulfuric acid the last time it picked up ore. So that works okay. That comes over here. We have a small set of centrifuges that we use to collect our first, initial shiny rock collection, which you can see there's a couple waiting on the belts here. Right now, we need a couple that are active. We can see most of them are not active, and that's really just to provide us with dull rocks here, which are put in here. We prioritize reclaiming the nuclear fuel cells, the spent fuel cells over here. Like here comes some. So we're reprocessing those and turning them back into a handful of dull rocks to make recycling work out for us. So that's good. Then this is our Covarex build. We have a single centrifuge doing all of the Covarex for us. And so as you can see, it produces, we have a nice backlog of shiny rocks here. We're using that for nuclear fuel for the trains, as well as the fuel cells for the nuclear power plant. I ended up putting beacons around these. I think we probably didn't even need them. But you can see here's the Covarex working. So it's grabbing the shiny rocks in here. And when it produces some, it actually puts them out with this one. And then a bunch of those shiny rocks are actually fed back in by the second inserter. So it just kind of runs in a loop here, which is a convenient way to do Covarex. I should talk a little bit about the train system next, because we just talked about nuclear fuel. So the trains were initially set up so that they're refueled here at the main base. So when they come in to drop stuff off, that is where they get their fuel again. So initially we have coal and or solid fuel, although I don't think we ever hooked up the solid fuel for train refueling. We really just used it for used coal initially, but then once we were able to produce rocket fuel, then we started to fuel the trains with rocket fuel, and then once we had nuclear fuel, we started to fuel them with nuclear fuel. And so the train refueling here is meant to prioritize whatever the most advanced fuel available is for that train. Okay, that was good. Speaking of solid fuel, we did build a solid fuel plant. And so this was you know, we'll talk about, I guess we'll talk about oil processing. So we had kind of a generic oil processing design that that started with refineries. It's got a circuit network switch in here that allows it to shut off the crude oil input if we've got enough sort of products set. We're collecting the various oil products here into tanks so that we can monitor them with the circuit network. This one I had to expand the lubricant build. Just when we were making blue belts, we needed more lubricant than we were naturally sort of providing, so we had to soup that up a little bit. But otherwise, there are circuits here that control, in this case, whether we need to crack heavy oil because we've got too much heavy oil, or if we need to crack light oil because we've got too much light oil. And so those are controlled by the circuit network that keeps all this stuff nicely balanced. This is the one assembler we had for rocket fuel for the trains, and I guess it's also supplying the nuclear train fuel assembler. And then the rest of this is really just about producing solid fuel. And we calculated that there was enough of this to actually run all of the planned smelting when we were at red belts with steel furnaces. So which we generally did. I don't know if we have too much left. I guess this is still using, you can see the solid fuel over here, but it is actually mixed with coal as well. So we're able to do that effectively. All right, so let's now talk about resource outposts and what those look like. So this is one of the earlier ones we built was I think these guys here. We can see the main defense here is rows of mines, and we use construction bots out at the outpost to replace the mines, and in some cases we even set up a little circuit condition with a loudspeaker that could alert us when we were out of mines at a base. Generally our designs for these outposts were based around a loading station like this. The blueprints for the loading station included blueprints for the trains, including trains with fuel. So the idea is that we would build them, the trains would have an initial set of fuel that would allow them to come and pick up their first load here. And again, we have circuit logic on these to ensure that we have balanced loading as well for the trains. And then once it was loaded, then it would go off to the main base, deliver its load, get refueled, and then come back and rinse and repeat. And generally speaking, the way that we managed train traffic through the use of train limits. And so all of the receiving stations have a little bit of circuit logic that basically says, only send me a train if I have enough spare capacity in these chests to unload the entire train. So like if you can't unload the entire train, don't bother coming. And so that works well. And you can see that, for example, here's one that's arriving now. This should be able to unload its full load relatively quickly into the chests. And then we should see all of the cargo wagons should empty at about the same time. How much is left in here? Okay, we're getting there. And then it pulls back out again, and then now the train limit should be 0. We can see train limit is 0, so just enough for that. The source stations are set up so that they just have a flat limit, which is set to 6. So it was built with 6 trains, and so it has a place for 6 trains to park. And so that means that we never have to run into trains that are stuck at a station without some place to go. The one place the train really stops is here, as in this case, where, well, actually this one, that's not a good example because that's actually out of stuff, but where's one that has stuff? So here it's got a full load, but no stations need any copper ore, and so it's just waiting here ready to go. And we generally built enough outposts so that we could so that we would always have trains ready to go, so that we could supply the base. And if we zoom out here, we can see there's definitely a fair amount of train activity that's going on here. Our train rail system was based around the same 100 by 100 grid that we're using for the rest of the base. That sort of made things convenient for the stations and making sure that various things connected. Most of the time we relied on straightaways and 3-way intersections that covered most of the use cases, although we did end up designing a 4-way intersection where we needed to. Okay, what else? So you may notice we built there's a lot of outposts here, a lot of outposts, and so a big part of doing that and making it not terrible to do is that we built a builder train, and this was also something that we could upgrade to change what sort of set of stuff was on here. But basically, what we have is we have a bunch of buffer chests here to collect stuff from the mall. And then we have a particular manifest. So we have constant combinators that say how much stuff should be on the train. We have limits or filters placed on the cargo wagons so that we have room for exactly what we want on here. And the rough idea is that we keep this loaded, and this has everything that we need to build an outpost. Initially, the way that we did it was, here's an example, or let's see, here's a smaller example, was something like this. We had, I think this was stone patches here. So we had some stone patches, and so we would plunk down our loading station and the stone patch, and then lay down the blueprints for the miners and belts and stuff, and then lay down the blueprints for the defenses, and then the build train would come and unload it, and the whole thing would be built by construction bots. And that worked out pretty well. We actually successfully built a couple of these things here, where you can see them sort of like fully defended outposts here. Eventually, it became clear that it was going to be much faster, especially once we got to Spidertrons. So I actually built a fleet of Spidertrons that were enabled with lasers and rocket launchers and things like that. And it turned out it was much more resource efficient to actually just go clear a big area and then build a border wall, right? So to find a choke point and then just sort of wall off this whole area. So rather than building individual outposts like this. And so that's what we ultimately did. So we have a number of border walls that we pushed out around the outside. Fortunately, after that sort of round of stuff, we had enough resource patches just about in order to get to the target. We did not tap this iron ore down here, or this stone or so on, but I think I used pretty much all of the copper outposts, copper patches that were available. But the nice thing was we were able to use our builder train blueprints in a couple of different ways. So the general idea was we would plunk down this build here, which we called an outpost seed, and so this has just enough stuff in it that you could come in and unload what you needed, including the bots and the materials, to construct the rest of the outpost. So we would come out here, we would build this part with our personal bots, and then we would stamp down the blueprints for the rest of it. So like you can see here, here's the original seed for this outpost. So we would build that, turn off our robots, stamp down the blueprints for the rest of it, and then switch the station name to be this outpost one. And so then the builder train would show up, would unload the stuff, unload the bots, and then it could build the rest of it. We actually modified this in a couple of ways. So one was that we for the border walls, we built the seed, but we just didn't build any resource patch stuff. But because it had all the stuff for doing the defenses, we were able to actually build these border walls like this using the same builder train, which was sort of a nice piece of flexibility for us. And then in addition, because we had to build so many resource outposts, we also switched the way that we built special versions of the outpost seed that instead of fully unloading the builder train, which sort of the other outpost seeds were doing, like just here's a full set of stuff to build an outpost, instead it relied on a slightly slower version, which I actually ended up liking better, where we defined a minimum set of stuff to have on hand, and which includes bots. And so this was originally designed for resupply. So in particular, actually, let's take a look. Let's see if we can find a builder train here. Yeah, that one was just leaving. But you can see a builder train was summoned to this outpost to sort of top up its supplies. That's largely repair packs at this point, unless we're constructing things. But the same mechanism that was used enabled us to sort of just build what was needed for the resource patch. And sometimes it would take multiple trips if there wasn't enough, especially some of the bigger outposts at the end needed sort of a couple trips to get all of the blue belts in, like for example this coal outpost here. But that actually worked out pretty well. The other part of the outposts that we had, and you can see it more over here, is for the ones that have defenses, we also have we use the same trains that we use to supply the main base from the oil outposts, also to maintain a little tank of oil here to power the flamethrowers for the walls. Turns out flamethrowers, in addition to doing that area of effect damage, which biters are pretty susceptible to fire damage, it actually doesn't burn through oil very fast. So most of the time that was pretty efficient. But then we also have a train here for bringing artillery shells in. So the final stage is we would build a couple of artillery outposts along the length of the wall. Here's another one here, and supply them with logistics bots. And the whole point of that, if we turn on the turrets, is just to keep the area right around the walls clear. We never upgraded any of our artillery distance, so that because we didn't really need it. If we needed to clear space, we were going to use the Spidertron army, and this is really just to prevent an expansion from showing up, plunking down a behemoth worm where it was close enough to hit the walls, but not close enough that our defenses could kill it. So the artillery just sort of serves to keep the areas right around the walls free for us. Artillery shells are manufactured back in the mall, and they are delivered by a special artillery train, which is obviously off and running somewhere. Let's go look at this guy. So it unloads a set of artillery shells in here. We have one artillery wagon. This almost never fires its stuff anymore, but it's a convenient way because this one wagon can carry like 100 artillery shells, and so that's enough to keep our stockpile here. And so we keep a little stash here. There's little stashes near the artillery shells themselves, right? So this has 5 in it. It's got another logistics chest that's requesting 5 more. So we just keep the artillery on hand, and it's really just meant to take out expansions like this one. Actually, that was a single worm. I was like, "Ooh, are we gonna see?" I guess that's all. That's actually all that was in there. I was wondering. I still would like to get a nice, bigger attack, but it's tricky to see because like stuff dies so fast. It's pretty effective defense. So. Okay, is that all the builder train stuff we want? Oh, here comes some. Here we go. Here's the walls in action. And so, like as you can see, like we're almost finished fixing stuff before the biters are even all dead. So that's pretty good. One nice thing that I think I thought about this run that I hadn't done previously is I decided not to upgrade the fire damage. And that means that, because the bots, and you might have seen it a little bit as the bots were coming out to repair stuff, the bots that fly over fire, they get damaged. And if you have too much fire damage, they die really fast. So keeping sort of non-upgraded fire damage meant the bots were more likely to be able to repair and not die and then come out enough to be repaired themselves. And so it meant that we didn't have to, we do have to periodically resupply bots into the network. Like this one is down to 37 construction bots. I think it was originally at 50. I think when this gets down to 20, we'll summon a builder train to sort of top up the robots as well. So like that should be one of these here. Yeah, there it is. Whoop, this guy. Yeah, so our minimum here is to have 20 construction bots in here. So if we get down to 20, and the way the logic here works is that when it gets down to 20, we summon the builder train. When the builder train arrives, we actually unload up to 40. And so that, oh, here we go. Here comes, let's see what we're getting. So we can see what we need here. It's asking for bots and repair packs. So actually we just, yeah, okay, so we're up to 43 construction bots. So that was pretty good. But it just unloads enough to top us up for the desired inventory level, and then it leaves. And so it actually then doesn't take very long to go get refilled back at the main base. So so that worked out pretty well. What else do we have? Like, you know, we ended up building some pretty big mining outposts here. This one seems to have no trains at it. I think that's okay. That's because some of the initial trains that we built didn't have... We didn't build all 6 trains because I was like, I don't think we'll need it. But and so as a result, some of the trains end up parked at essentially empty stations nearby. I was doing a little bit of cleanup. Like I think I went back to this. Is it this one of them? No, that's not one of them. I think I have fully exhausted. I think I have a fully exhausted one here. Is this it? This is nearly fully exhausted. So like, yeah. So I went down and sort of dropped this train limit to 5, and then made whatever train was here leave, and then it ended up going to sort of I could gradually retire the outposts that were done, but only if I needed extra trains, right? And it's really just a handful where I had not built all 6 trains at the initial outposts. What else is there to cover? I guess the last thing to cover is we also had this, we also figured out how to mine the initial lake, the starting lake, so that we could get a bunch of water out. This results in like a pretty crazy network of water pipes feeding into the nuclear power plant. We actually, even had to go a little further afield. Fortunately, this end of the nuclear power plant was like overhung a lake, and so we were able to put the pumps sort of right up next to it, which is a reason that lots of players build expandable nuclear power plants over the top of large lakes. So that was good stuff. And I guess that is pretty much it. I guess we could talk about the module builds here. So this was, we actually had builds set up specifically to make modules, particularly the tier 3 modules, because we needed so many of them, and they take such a long time to make. So we in fact ended up doubling that and making a second build of it in order to move through and build all of the modules that we needed to make. I think that's about it. I think that covers just about everything, all the features of this base and the components that we had for it. It was a pretty fun exercise. It was kind of neat to do the design up front and to figure out how we could sort of upgrade our way all the way to the mega base. And I was very pleased that the general outline like pretty much worked. Like we were able to use our designs largely unmodified. We did run into a couple of tweaks as we went. The blueprints I'm going to link to now are the final set of blueprints that we will end up using. I suppose one last thing to highlight that I'm seeing just now, we also just, if you beaconize and put tier 3 speed modules into pump jacks, and we had a couple that were sort of conveniently inside the base, turns out like the main base almost never requests oil because of these guys here. So like this one's even full. That's crazy. I guess it did get a train in here, obviously. So it's trying to drain the last bits in here. A fully balanced fluid unloading is definitely a tricky thing, and so like you can see, it's not entirely perfect, but I guess we also have it set up so that if it like nothing happens to it, it eventually gives up and leaves. So but that is good stuff. Train intersection wise, like there's a pretty constant rate of trains coming in. Like this is a pretty resource hungry base. You can see all of the trains coming in from the hinterlands out here. Generally that works pretty well. There's sort of like not perfect pathing here, right? This is the only connection between sort of the eastern and western rail network, so we call it the Great Transverse Railroad. And so there's lots of times where like we have an iron train over here, especially like maybe like these guys here. So like these iron trains have to go like all the way here. They come all the way north. they cut across and then they come all the way down to like get to wherever station they're going to. I suppose if I was going to keep running this, I would go ahead and sort of build another railroad here. That would sort of really, you know, it might have made sense to sort of put one in periodically in the middle just to sort of keep things moving. I think the other thing that, you know, we could have thought about doing was building an additional builder train or mall somewhere further down this end if we wanted to. Instead, we just sort of relied on just having massive amounts of construction bots. So we ended up with 2,000 construction bots, which actually is not quite as high as I might have expected. Logistics bots are not really required for much. They're primarily being used to move stuff to the builder train or for supplying and shuttling around the fuel for the nuclear power plant. But you can see, like, I've got the bots turned on in the map view, and there's like just really only a handful of active ones. In fact, if we look at the row report, you know, it's like we only have 3 active logistics bots. So that worked out okay. So I think that covers everything. So I hope you've enjoyed the base overview. I hope if you have not yet built a mega base, this inspires you to think about how to do it, like maybe to think about having a design approach ahead of time, doing a bunch of design work for the blueprints, and then, you know, taking a playthrough and seeing how it goes. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks to everyone who watched the series, and even if you didn't watch the whole series, I hope you enjoyed this base overview and it gave you some ideas. So that's what we have for today. So as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, and until then, bye.